Well, I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamoni, and I'm an acceptance coach who helps people heal from grief, loss, and trauma to discover their self-acceptance and step into their personal power. This podcast is your dedicated space for healing, growth, and transformation. Each episode shares insightful and inspirational stories along with practical tools and actionable insights to help guide you along your healing journey. Today, I have a special guest with us. This is the guy that got me started on my podcast journey, and I want to welcome Mr. Russ Tellep. He's a trauma-informed somatic coach, brain spotting practitioner. He's also a content creator, and he is his own podcaster, by the way. He's got an awesome podcast that I want you guys to check out. I'll put the links there at the end of the show here. He has a big passion for helping those understand their nervous systems and the effects it has on their daily lives, and then leveraging that information to live the best possible life that they can. Russ, welcome to my podcast, brother.
Thanks, man. It's an honor to be here, bro.
Thank you. I was so grateful. You're the first guy I did a podcast with, and I was so nervous, didn't know what to do at that point. But we had a good conversation, and I'm
We
grateful
did,
we stayed
yeah.
connected.
I thought so too, yeah. And I've watched you kind of grow in this journey that you've been putting together for the last several months, and man, it's amazing.
Well, thank you, brother.
Yeah,
I've had the honor to talk to people from all across the world, from the Netherlands to Australia to Africa to
I
Canada
know.
to all over, and it's been a beautiful world to see that we're thousands of miles apart, and at the same time we have shared experiences of life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's kind of hard to believe, right?
It really is.
Some of
You,
the
you think
stories you meet, some of the people you meet. Yeah, it really makes things a lot of fun.
It really does. I've
Yeah.
I've been amazed that despite, it's funny too that we all have our takes on grief and loss and trauma. And even though there's cultural aspects to these things, language differences, and all these different factors, we still have this common core of who we are as people as we navigate those journeys. So,
It's very true, and in fact, we're all human beings. We all have brains, and our brains are all wired the same way. So of course, our experiences are going to be very similar, right?
definitely.
Yeah, it
So,
all goes right back to our wiring.
yeah, and I think the crazy part I've told people on this wild journey, this big thing up here is 2 million years old. It's not wired for happiness, but it's wired for survival.
Yeah, in
And
fact, there's parts of it that are 400 million years old. The dorsal vagal complex of our polyvagal system is estimated to be about 400 million years old. That's
holy
where our
cow.
that's where our freeze state comes from. If you imagine like an invertebrate floating around in the ocean and a shark swims by, the only thing it could do, can't fight, can't run. The only thing it can do is just freeze and play dead.
I had no idea. I always
Mhm.
learn something new on here.
Yeah, yeah. In
Yeah.
fact, if you oh man, just threw my brain. Um, if you look at a brain,
Whoa.
this portion right here of the brain stem, and the more primitive portions of our brains evolved around 400 million years ago. And this is kind of where our dorsal vagal complex is, and this is where our free state lives. And then here in the limbic system is about 200 million years old. And then the prefrontal cortex here is about 2 million years old, and that's where mammals begin to connect and live in numbers.
So I have to ask you, since you got that image up in front of the screen, when
Sure.
we're going through, grief and loss or trauma, what parts of our brain really fire the most in those events that we experience?
It depends on what state you're in, So if you're if you imagine trauma like a ladder, right? And up here is your safe connected space. This is where we live when we're in the present. This is where we live when our energy is in that ventral vagal complex, which is kind of our prefrontal cortex, right? And then if for some reason something happens and it drives you into fight or flight, you're in about the middle of that ladder. And when you're in the middle of that ladder, you're living right here in the limbic system. This is where your hippocampus is. This is where all your stress hormones start getting triggered and sending you into a fight or flight mode. And that's right here. So that's kind of
Fascinating.
the center of that ladder. But if for some reason that doesn't resolve the issue, right, and make you feel safe, then you can drop all the way into a freeze state. And that's where you're in this spot right here. When I work with clients, I do like an intake with them, and we do what I call a nervous system mapping. So we'll go through and we'll identify kind of where they live, where they spend the majority of their time. And I find that people who've experienced childhood trauma or complex trauma, they typically live in that free state about 60 to 80% of their time.
Since we're talking about this, I'm gonna throw myself on the doormat here for a
Sure.
minute. I had a few experiences a couple weeks ago where I ran into some people that I didn't feel safe around, honestly.
Hmm.
And something I don't know why, but I like could not talk for whatever reason. I
Yeah.
ended up in that freeze place and I couldn't figure it out. And I was going, why is like it's like my brain and my mouth just like disconnected. Um,
That's because the language centers of your brain are up here. And if you
mm,
imagine your brain like this, right? And you flip your lid to expose the limbic system of your brain, this part right here. Once you've done that, you've taken the prefrontal cortex offline. It's not operating, it's turned off. And you're reacting purely out of instinct and somatic experience. That's where it all comes from, is right there in that limbic system. So once you're there, this is off. And if this is off, of course you can't talk because that's where all your speech centers live.
so when we end up in that freeze state, we're really getting back into our primitive self, if you will, is what it sounds
Yeah.
like.
Our primitive stress coping mechanisms, I would say. Not necessarily our primitive self, because I think that honestly, your sense of self is up here, right? Your sense of self is right here. This is you. This is the intelligent person that a human being is, and it lives right here in the prefrontal cortex. So once you turn that off, in a way, you're going back to the primitive ways that we as organisms would deal with trauma or a lack of safety. And when it turns that section of the brain off, it's just, you can't access it. Pretty
Well, I think
wild.
yeah,
And if
it's a
you've ever
very
seen
wild
somebody in
experience.
like a full-fledged trauma response, they are absolutely not coherent. They are not present. You know, they will do some things that are so destructive to their own lives that it can shut things down for the rest of their lives, but they have no comprehension that they're doing it. It just happens.
I've experienced that in my life with trauma I've gone through. I'll openly share. I've been in those moments deep in my trauma, and I can recall them that I said and did some wild things that like after the fact, after I somehow was able to get that freeze thing unfrozen, I was going,
Yeah.
whoa, like where did that come from? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Once you flip that lid, man, you're all bets are off. you, know, you are not in control anymore. Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that it's interesting to me how our brains work. And I know very little about this, so I'm excited to have you on the show today for that reason.
Mhm.
You know a lot more than I do in that capacity, but it's fascinating to me how our brains work and how we've all heard the fight or flight concept or fight or flight, freeze or fawn.
Mhm.
We've all heard those things and we use them very loosely, but
Mhm.
there's so much more than just that phrase that goes on with the brain.
Oh yeah, I mean it's all chemical reactions in the brain, and what the crazy part is when you're dealing with complex trauma is you have all these chemical reactions in the brain driving these emotions and driving these thoughts and driving this behavior, but that's not where it begins. That's not where the trauma begins. The trauma begins in the body. Did you know that two-thirds of the serotonin in your body's system comes from your gut?
Really now.
Yeah, they call it the second brain. So you have such a large production of serotonin in your gut. Now it's not used the same way that the brain uses it. The brain uses it for happiness, to induce happiness. The serotonin in your gut, they think, has a lot to do with digestion and the gut brain feedback loop. I don't know if you've ever been really, really hungry
Yep.
and you almost get paranoid, like freaked out, like you're having a full on trauma response sometimes when you're really hungry, and that's your gut telling your brain, "Hey, I need food," and your brain telling your gut, "Well, blah blah blah," and it goes back and forth, and it just sends you into a trauma response essentially.
That is
This is what
fascinating.
drive. This is what's driven us for the last several million years to survive, to reproduce and eat and fight.
I think that, it's really powerful that I've been learning in my own journey, different because I don't study somatic, but I've learned that it's just fascinating how so much of our body, I mean, like 95% of our function going on every day is just automated. I mean, most people don't think about you're not counting how many times your heart beats per minute. You're not telling your lungs to breathe in and out. You're not even all of our emotions, like I'm just doing this, are happening so fast without you even thinking.
Yeah.
It's incredible that our bodies can do that, self-regulate to the extent that they do.
Yeah, and our brains are designed in a way to reduce energy, the energy used to do anything, right? So, if you ever gone for a long drive, like say you're driving up to the mountain. I live in Colorado, so I'll go for drives up to the mountains. There's a town about an hour away called Cripple Creek, and they do like casinos and stuff like that. But they have all kinds of cool stuff going up and up in that area. Lots of nice hikes and things like that. And I'll go up there a couple times a month typically. And I find that I leave my house and then I'm there because I've done the drive so many times that my brain just completely automates the process of getting to Cripple Creek. So I have my goal of getting to Cripple Creek, but everything in between, my brain just does for me. I don't know if
Yeah,
you've ever experienced that.
oh, I've had times I went through
Yeah.
a traffic light, and I'll be dead honest. I don't know if it was red or green or yellow. I don't even know. I just went through it, and then down the road. I'm like, no, wait a second, was that green? Like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's
Your brain,
incredible.
essentially, our brains are designed to learn repetitive tasks and then complete them autonomically so that we don't have to expend the energy to think through the process of getting to Cripple Creek. We just get to Cripple Creek. And then we use our present connected mind to connect with others while we're there.
So it's almost like our brain keeps record of these patterns we go through in life,
Absolutely.
and they're
Anytime
just
you do something and then you go to do it again, there is a certain level of autonomic energy that is completing that task. And the more you complete that task, the more your autonomic system takes over and does it for you.
See, that's fascinating. You're reminding me too on the trauma side of things. I struggled personally with complex PTSD when I went through narcissistic abuse, and something that I didn't fully understand till I read this book about it was that when we experience trauma, it's almost that same thing happens. There's a loop that happens up here,
Mhm.
and it's almost like your brain is like a hamster on a wheel. It just like that hamster is just going 1,000 miles an hour and like it can't get off the loop for some reason.
Well, yeah,
Uh,
because the trauma response triggers more trauma response, so you just go into this spiral of trauma response, right? So, yeah, it's pretty. Now, one thing to keep in mind though is your mind is not what's creating the trauma response. That's the hard part to grasp. Your body is creating the trauma response, and then it sends a signal to the mind that you're in danger, and then the mind starts pumping out all these stress hormones to try to either get you prepared to fight or leave, or to freeze in place and try to survive. Basically, prepare for death.
gotcha. Because the brain's all about survival at that point.
And the brain doesn't know the difference between something that's trivial and something that's life threatening. All it knows is danger, and danger equals death. So the brain knows to either fight back to survive it or to freeze in place, pull all of your blood pressure into your core, protect the core and protect the organs, screw the limbs, be as small as possible and as not non-visible as possible to try to survive.
I find that fascinating that our bodies do that without us even like
Mm-hmm.
literally without even consciously thinking about it. It just auto
Absolutely.
processes that. So. Well, Russ, I'm really glad to have you on the show today. I know we're going to talk a little bit today about narcissistic abuse and
Mm-hmm.
trauma a bit, and I know that's a very sensitive topic for a lot of people. I also know it's a very stigmatized word nowadays in society because
It is.
something I learned on my journey when I went through it and I started recognizing the abuse I was going through, and I started talking to people, and one of the comments I got on Facebook was that if you're having to research narcissistic abuse, you're probably dealing with it, and that stuck in my head a lot when I heard that phrase.
Yeah, and to be very clear, when we talk about narcissistic abuse, we're not talking about narcissistic personality disorder. When you identify a family member, a coworker, a position of someone in a position of authority or power as being narcissistic, you're not saying this person qualifies for a DSM diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder. Obviously, we're not psychiatrists. It's not our job to do that.
Hmm.
But the word narcissism and the word narcissist has existed in the English language forever. And it's
Yeah.
used to describe a person who has no empathy, a person who intentionally hurts others to try to make themselves feel better, and a person who cannot accept responsibility or accountability for anything that they do. And that's really the only difference. And here's the crazy part. I know this is true for me. I don't know about you or the listeners, but I learned through my journey, which has only been about 2.5 years long. I've only been doing this stuff for about 2 years. Prior to that, I was, whew, I was a mess, man. But one thing I learned is even though they are a narcissist or they are acting in a narcissistic way and abusing you in a narcissistic way, your reactions are still yours. And in a lot of ways, at least for me, I found that I was just as toxic as the narcissist, just in a different way, in a way to try to survive. The big difference is someone who is not the narcissist can look at their behavior and say, oh, yeah, man, why did I do that? That was stupid. That was ridiculous. And feel bad about it. Where a narcissist would look at their behavior and say, oh, he caused me to do that, or she caused me to do that. It has nothing to do with me. It's their fault. That's the big difference. So you can be just as toxic and just as abusive and not be the narcissist.
I think that's really powerful what you just said, by the way, because when I was going through that abuse I was going through, I can say it now. I couldn't tell you this 2 years ago when it happened, but I turned into somebody I wasn't completely, and
Yeah.
I turned into a very nasty person. And
Yeah.
I look back on that, and I'm only saying this because of what you just said a minute ago, but now I'm able to look back and say that situation turned me into somebody I'm not, and I'm not. And I can even say, by the way, I'm not proud of who I turned into. I'm not proud that I reacted and responded the way I did. I'm not proud of that.
Yeah.
And I don't take pleasure in treating people like that. I don't. It makes me
Yeah.
sick. But
Yeah.
it taught me, going through the abuse that I went through, it really taught me that when you see people that enter your world who act that way or behave that way or exhibit those behaviors onto you, those are just not safe people. And I'll be honest now, when I run into people who do have narcissistic behaviors to an extent where it triggers me, I walk. I don't engage it anymore because I've learned my lesson, had to learn it the hard way. But I learned it that, just like you said, I can become just as toxic as that person doing that. And at that point, I'm only hurting myself. I'm not healing myself. I'm hurting myself. And so I've had to learn that power to walk away at that point and remove that person, from my
Yeah,
life.
absolutely. And the part that's the hardest for people to accept and realize, including the narcissist, the only difference is the narcissist never does, is the fact that although their behavior is so troubling that I'm reacting in a certain way, that's not their reaction. That's our reaction. We are the ones that are reacting. We are the ones that are reacting to the somatic experience and then letting ourselves behave in a way that we're not accustomed to and that is can be hurtful to the other person. So the biggest part of my healing from narcissistic abuse, and this extends from childhood with my father through countless relationships over the years, they were all the same person. They all had the same behavior, the same type of reactions. I can look back and see it. Can't see it at the time, but I can look back and see it. But what I realize is, as a child, for example, I was what you would probably call or considered a troubled child, right? I was in trouble constantly. Looking back, the reason I was in trouble constantly is because I was dealing with the kind of trauma that I was dealing with at home with my father. But I was still the one in trouble. I was still the one that was doing the things that I was doing that I knew was wrong or hurtful, and I was doing them. Now I was doing them in a way to scream for help, but I was still doing them. And learning the difference, learning to appropriately express yourself and ask for help when you need it is probably the biggest step, and accepting the fact that you've been hurtful as well is probably the biggest step in my healing process, was realizing that I have responsibility here and I have to own the way that I'm responding, or I'm giving them all the power. And that's the really cool part about it, is once you get there and you realize that and you internalize that, you're taking that power away from the narcissist and putting it back in your court. Now it's yours. Now you can respond the way that you want to respond. You may still want to respond in a toxic way. You know,
Yeah.
it takes time to learn that, not to be so offended by their behavior, to realize that their behavior, just like your behavior, has nothing to do with you. It's coming from within them. And once you can do that and separate yourself from their behavior and them from yours, it makes healing so much easier.
Yeah, that's something, I can share that we've been no contact with certain family members for, 2, 3 years now. And I
Yeah.
can say that, one of them reached out before Christmas, and I used to get really like heart racing when they would reach out. It just would really it's just hard, just trauma response. That this last year when it happened, I caught myself laughing. I don't know what the hell happened, but got that text message and I just started laughing, and I was going, I don't have those feelings anymore. And now that's just having that distance between it. But I also started to realize that you brought up that I get to control my response. I get to control if I want to engage. I get to control how much contact is in that situation,
And how?
and how. And when you give yourself, by the way, it's been a powerful lesson I've had to learn over the years myself. I was a trouble kid like you. I got in trouble all the time. And something I've learned in my most recent years of life is that there's a big difference between reacting to something and responding to something. And when we get in that
Yes.
reaction place, reaction is a lot of emotion in that place. There's a lot of, especially when you're dealing with a narcissist, it's very easy to get angry. It's very easy to lose control. It's easy for you to lash out. It's easy for you to be just as abusive as you said as they are.
Do
When
you
you
know
reach,
why it's so easy?
why?
Because we're not doing it. It's automatic. Just like that drive to Cripple Creek, your brain's doing it for you to try to excuse you from the having to spend that energy on it. It's an autonomic response.
So our response is just basically automated at that point because
Mhm.
we know what to expect. We know what we're seeing. The brain is saying, "I've been here, done that. I know how to do this."
Your brain says, I've done this and I've been in this situation before, and this is the way that I responded, and I survived. So it must be right.
That is a neat perspective.
Yeah. So imagine you're walking down a trail in the woods and a mountain lion jumps out in front of you. Probably not going to happen. But if it was to happen, you would probably be a little frightened by that. Your initial response might be a surge of energy to be able to fight this thing off if he attacks you, right?
Yeah.
Or to run away. So that's an automatic response. We don't think, oh my gosh, there is a mountain lion. Let me start pumping some cortisol and adrenaline into my blood so that I can start mobilizing some energy in order to fight this thing off. Your brain just does it for you. And then if for some reason he does attack and you're not able to fight it off, your next response might be to hug up against a tree to protect your organs and just sit there and take it, but try to reduce the amount of damage that you take while doing it. And that's not you making those decisions. You're not fighting this mountain lion like, oh shit, I'm losing. Let me go curl up in a ball next to this tree and try to protect my neck, throat, and organs. It's just your body does it for you. And
Yeah.
then
So
if
what
you
you're
survive that incident, fighting didn't help you survive. Freezing did, right? So what your response might be the next time you see a mountain lion is you feel the same way that you felt in that moment, which is pure terror. And you pull into yourself and you will shut down just the same way that you did that day. And because your brain has learned that that made you survive. So that will be a set way to deal with it going forward.
I think that's interesting the way you talked about that because you're one of very few people I've met that's brought that concept to the table, and it's almost like we're in a degree, it's almost like we're at cause of our brain and our body that are seeing these things and automatically, like you said, firing off cortisol and adrenaline into the blood or saying, well, we survived it this way, so we're gonna do it this way. But also knowing, I think what, my big question I have for you, and I'm trying to figure out how to ask that is, how do we take control of ourselves at that point? How do we what are there steps we can take in that moment where the brain and body is guiding us, but we're at the same place saying, maybe I don't need to react that harshly to this situation. I can take my power back. I can take my control back. And instead of reacting to this, I can respond.
Yeah. I think that in a situation as truly life threatening as being attacked by a mountain lion, the responses I just described are probably perfectly normal and probably the best course of action, right? Fight off as much as you can and then just protect yourself from getting as much damage as you can. That's ultimately the way that you should respond to a mountain lion attack. But let's say the guy flipped you off on the highway and you get the same response in your gut. Obviously, you're not in danger. It's just some jerk off on the highway flipping you off, right? Not a big
Yeah.
deal. But that's not how your body receives it. Your body receives it as, well, what did I do to get him to flip me off? What did I do wrong? So then your body starts going into this, I've done something wrong, I'm not enough, or I've done something wrong and I've hurt someone else. And it sends your body into a trauma response, your body, not your brain. And then the signals from your body go to your brain, which then sends your brain into a trauma response. The trick is, for me, the trick has been identifying the somatic experience when it happens, realizing what's happening now that I know what's happening, and preventing it from triggering the trauma response in the brain.
So,
And then the more you do that, the more you feel that energy in your body, the more you're processing whatever trauma is causing that energy. You have to feel through it. You have to complete the response. If you end up down here, the only way to get back up here is to climb the ladder. So you have to go back through fight or flight. So if you're in a frozen state sitting on your couch for 6 months because you're afraid to go outside because what might happen, the only way to get to here is to go through that fight or flight energy, that sympathetic energy, to climb the ladder back up here to your connected state.
so
You
there,
have to
so
go
there,
through the process. You have to feel it in order to heal those emotions and those responses.
well, I think that's what I personally have been working on that myself a lot through some of the trauma I'm still healing from, but I also share it with people that I coach as well. I think a big one that a lot of people still cling to today is this idea of controlling emotions. They don't really,
Yeah.
I can't stand that phrase. I always use this example when I'm on a Zoom call. I'm like, here's my emotion. I'm happy today. There's nothing here, right? It's all
Mm-hmm.
here. So I always tell people instead of controlling that emotion, listening to it, because it's got
Listening to
something.
it with compassion and allowing yourself the space to feel it, because ultimately you have to feel through it. You have to lean into that feeling, and it's an uncomfortable feeling. Let's admit it, right? When you're
Yep.
walking into work and you're 5 minutes late and you're like, shit, I'm 5 minutes late. I'm going to get yelled at, or I'm a crappy employee, or whatever it is that's going through your head. You have to lean into it and feel it, because if you just ignore it, it's stuck there, right? It's stuck there and you have to go through it. So you're going to constantly be reminded of that trauma. Your brain and your body want to heal. They want to be healthy. They don't want to be holding on to these things, but you have to process them in order to let them go.
Well, I think that's the hard part that I know all of us struggle with is that we have repeated circumstances of trauma over life. And I think, using myself as an example, I've been around so many, I'm not going to call them narcissists, but I'm going to call them narcissistic behavioral people in my life. And that's been jobs and family and all over
I
the
think you,
place.
I think you can call them
And
narcissists.
I try to be careful with it because one of my biggest things I learned on my journey as I started diving into narcissism is that there's a lot of people that see somebody having a bad day, say one thing, and they go, "Ooh, narcissist." And I go, "No, that's not a narcissist. That's somebody that has a behavior of that." I've learned that to really truly call somebody a narcissist is a repeated pattern over time of behavior to establish that because we all have narcissistic tendencies, all of us do, and we all
Of
have them
course.
show.
Yeah.
We all have them show, by the way. Sometimes it's going to be up here, sometimes it's really small. So we all have that. But when we broadly generically say that everybody who upsets me or does this is a narcissist is mislabeling and misusing that term in a lot of
Maybe.
ways.
I like to think of the word narcissist, although it has ended up in the DSM-5, and it is a official diagnosis for a mental health disorder. I'm not talking about the DSM-5. I'm not talking about the mental disorder. I'm talking about the behavior and the lived experience of the survivor. And I think that the word narcissist or narcissism started looking like a 80s hip hop artist there for a second, um, is for the survivor, they need a way to verbalize the way that they've been treated and what's happened in their lives to heal. You have to be able to describe what you're feeling in order to work on healing those things, right? So one of the easiest
Exactly.
ways to describe it is using the word narcissism or narcissist. It's not about pathology. It's not about the DSM-5. It's about the lived experience of the survivor. So I think it's fine. I push back on people when they try to tell me that I can't use that word because I'm not a psychiatrist. Well, neither is the Webster Dictionary.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
like what you just said is really powerful because that's what helped me on my healing journey a lot is I don't walk around shooting the word narcissism all over the place, but when I look at my trauma, I use it as a way to define it because I found it really helpful with a lot of coaching clients I've had that when we're able to label something to understand it, but not make it a crutch or make it an excuse, but label that experience for what it is, that
Yeah.
gives us a place to say, okay, I experienced X. I feel this way. It helps us process and navigate that journey a little bit better without judgment, by the way, without blame, but really from an observer standpoint that this is what we experienced.
Yeah. Uh, One way I've found to try to avoid using the word if it is triggering for other people is I'll just use the word toxic. It can mean a lot of the only difference between a toxic person and a narcissist is a toxic person is capable of admitting the fault and looking inward where a narcissist can't. Narcissists are very broken, very hurt people. They are in every way, shape, and form a victim of their upbringing or whatever brought that type of behavior around. But they are very, very hurt, very, very broken, very, very damaged people. And when you look at it from that perspective, it can make things easier for you in your healing because a lot of these people, especially a grandiose narcissist, there's several different types of narcissists, but a grandiose is what you typically think of when you think of narcissist. You know, $10,000 suit, getting out of their Ferrari, treating everybody like crap. You know, woman after woman after woman, or man after man after man, expecting the world to give them what they expect that they need. That is a grandiose narcissist. Where like a covert narcissist can be a lot more quiet, seem a lot more in tune with their emotions. The, a covert narcissist is the one that will come in and tell you about how terrible that their day was and how they screwed everything up and they're a terrible person and a terrible employee or a terrible mother, and you go out of your way to try to help them feel better. That could be a covert narcissist that you're dealing with. They're very sneaky. A grandiose narcissist doesn't care if you know that he's a narcissist or she's a narcissist. Where a covert narcissist goes out of their way to mask it in a layer of vulnerability because it's not real. It's not real vulnerability.
Yeah.
Vulnerability and almost acting as if they're less than in order to make you make them more than.
Yeah, and that's been my experience I've had with narcissism is I've dealt with the covert in family situations, and I'll be honest, they do exactly what you said. They use this vulnerability is a loose word I'll use for that, but they really make themselves out to be very hurt and damaged.
Hurt.
They need people to lift them up. They need people to
Mm-hmm.
tell them how good they are, constant.
These are the people
Um,
that can't fill up the air in their tires. They have to have someone do it for them. These are the people that can't pump their own gas because they're incapable and they need help. These are the people that suck the life out of you because you're willing to be helpful and giving, and they will suck that energy dry.
But they're also the people that when you stop giving that to them, that's when it gets nasty.
Gone.
That's when the lid comes off and you find out the real nasty hidden behind it.
You know, for me, my experience with this type of person was when I started watching videos and things about narcissism, and I started going through my certification to become a narcissistic abuse specialist. That word became a trigger for her. That word, anytime I stopped using the word to try to stop triggering her, just to keep myself sane and safe. I started using the word toxic, like I was telling you earlier. But that word and the knowledge that you know what's going on just destroys their world and will send them. You got to be careful because it can make them quite violent.
Oh, it can. You got to be, especially with the malignant narcissists, you got to be very careful what you
Yeah.
say. And, I was going to ask you too, by the way, do you know where the word narcissist originates from? Have you heard the story about that?
Yeah. A guy from Latin, like Latin times, right? Narcisito or something like that.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
back in the medieval ages. I think it was like 1400, but he was a guy that would go down to this lake and he would stare at his reflection in the
Yeah.
water constant. And
Yeah.
he was given all these princesses to marry. He was given a castle, and he could never take his eyes off himself. And he actually ended up treating those people like utter garbage. And he was got very abusive. He got very violent. I mean, he was a very oppressive person. He was very obsessed with himself, and ultimately that's what killed him. And so that's kind of where
Unfortunately,
the story.
if you look back through history, the people that have made the most history, the people that have accomplished the most, give you a good example is Napoleon. Napoleon was a grandiose narcissist to a T, but he conquered the world, right? So these people can come across as holy mackerel. Look at everything they've accomplished in their lives. And they do accomplish it in their lives, but they accomplish those things at the detriment of the people that they claim to love.
That's a well said way to put that, and
Yeah.
that's what I've caught on to when I see people like that. And the thing I like to say, since we talk about this topic, and it's because people misuse the word a lot, is just because you had a one-off experience with somebody doesn't always necessarily mean they're a narcissist, but you want to look for patterns of behavior. You want to look for identifying things that come out because, I'll say when you deal with a covert narcissist, you'll notice one-off things here and there when it starts, but after you start catching on to it, you start seeing it constantly. You see it everywhere. And that's
Yeah, when
that's kind
they
of your clue to watch for things to protect yourself in that
absolutely
aspect.
when they start their trauma bond cycle, trying to develop that trauma bond, and it's intentional. They're developing that trauma bond with you. You know, it's that cyclical kind of relationship. You go from holy crap, these people are amazing. They're putting me on a pedestal and they love me so much and they're blah 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 blah, and then boom, you get hit with the devaluing phase where suddenly you're a piece of garbage and you can't do anything right. And then they try to suck you back in after they push you away and they try doing that. And then they love bomb you all over again. And it just creates this cycle, which then creates the addiction in your brain, which is the trauma bond. A trauma bond is a physical addiction. It may as well be meth. You're
Yeah,
just
I
addicted to being treated a certain way.
well, that's what I learned through my journey too, is that yeah, I learned that narcissists use I call them six things they use really well. They use with trauma bonds in particular, they'll use guilt, shame, and blame very tactically. And it's not in this like one-off thing. It's a very targeted
Very
way to hit
tactically and very
somebody.
maliciously because they know exactly what buttons to push to really get a reaction from you. They know what to do, they know what to say, and they
Yeah, and
do
then
it intentionally.
yeah, and that's what makes it hard. I've gotten asked before, how can you break a trauma bond? Or I feel stuck in a trauma bond. I say, I can tell you why and I can tell you how, but I can tell you it's not easy to break because like you just said, it's almost like a meth addiction. I mean, you're just
It
you
is.
have to really face those hard realities when you're in that trauma bond, even if you don't like it. You have to kind of get yourself to say, I use this in my coaching. I say, when you're in that trauma bond, try to be the observer. Pull yourself up here and just watch what's happening down here. Just an observer. Just look and take note. Because that's the way to kind of break that enough for you to see what's going on. And then it's really about you changing actions that you take. Then that's it's hard. I tell people it's not easy. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
But it takes a lot of work to push through those.
Well, the good thing about it The bad thing about it is it truly is a physical addiction. You're addicted to feeling a certain way. We're attracted to what we're used to, right? So when we feel a somatic experience in our body, we strive for it because that's what we're used to. Like if we're constantly flooded with cortisol and adrenaline in our body pumping through our veins, these are terrible, terrible hormones to have coursing through your veins on a daily basis. These are meant for you to run away from life-threatening danger or fight off an attacker that's going to kill you. They're not meant to feel constantly and perpetually, right? So we become addicted to those chemicals in our body because that's what we're used to. And if we survived yesterday feeling that way, then it must be the right way to feel today.
Back to what you said earlier today on this podcast.
It
If we
all goes
survive
back
this
to perceived
situation,
safety.
yeah, it's like you said when we started this podcast. If our brain says, "Hey, we survived this way," the brain all of a sudden says, "Okay, well, if I see that again, do this over here."
And that's how we get stuck in these trauma responses that last sometimes decades. I lived probably 40 years of my life over the past 47 years have been in a fight, flight, or freeze state. Very little of my life did I spend up here. Now, in the last 2 years, I've spent a lot more time up here because I've learned how to get there.
I think that's a really powerful place to get to. And I wanted to do this podcast with you today because you have great knowledge and experience in this topic of field. And I can tell you as well that breaking that trauma bond I had was very, very hard. And I will say my body got used to fight, flight, or free. I got used to it. I didn't know happiness. I didn't know how to let go. I didn't, all those things were, and I'll say this too for people that are going through this kind of abuse, letting go of that to give yourself permission to be happy, to be free from it, is almost scary because you just don't know what it looks like. You don't know what it feels
Terrifying.
like.
Yeah.
Your brain. I read a book by Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he said the biggest part of changing yourself that's so hard is that when your brain starts wanting to make changes, your body hasn't caught up, and your body starts telling your mind, "Hey, we've been doing this for 20 years. What are
And
you
it's
doing?"
worked. It's
And it's
worked.
worked.
We're
Why,
alive.
why are you why are you changing this on me right now?
Yeah.
What the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
And so he was talking about the reason we get anxiety and all these problems when we go through change or we break a trauma bond. It's getting this and this lined up again to work cohesively.
Yeah. And it's just no longer having the subconscious need to be in that space, which brings us to some of the healing practices to get around this stuff. And
Yeah.
you have talk therapy, and there's a place for talk therapy. My problem with talk therapy is one of the easiest way to trigger a trauma response is to think about the trauma itself. All right. When you close your eyes and you think about the most traumatic event in your life, which I'm assuming is the loss of your son, right? So if you close your eyes and you just start really thinking about the events of that day and how it all went down, what do you feel in your gut?
Me personally, I feel sick to my stomach and I feel
That's
dead
the
inside.
trauma response that's associated with that event. So it's still there, still festering, right? And some of those things we need, right? If you're a child and you touch the stove and burn your hand, the next time you go to touch that stove, you're going to feel it in your gut and it's going to prevent you from touching the stove. That's how we protect ourselves. So some of this is good, but some of it gets stuck and it starts affecting our lives. And that's where we have to go in somatically and release some of that stress. That's where somatic work comes in. So instead of approaching it from the top, talking about the trauma, re-traumatizing ourselves, we approach it from the bottom, dealing with the somatic experience, and then heal it from underneath. We don't even have to talk about the trauma.
See, I think that's very powerful because, like you said, in my own personal journey, I'm not a fan of talk therapy because there's parts of my trauma I don't want to relive.
Yeah.
It's too painful. It puts me in a really bad place. And I'll share. 3 weeks ago, I got triggered by somebody on a call and it took me 3 days to get over it, believe it or not. And my trauma just like took hold and I was kept going, let it go, let it go. It would not let go. It
But
just would
letting it
stay there.
go isn't necessarily the answer. Sometimes you just have to feel it. You have to lean into it, feel it, understand it, approach it with compassion, because everything your brain is doing, no matter how destructive it is in your life, it's doing it to help you. It's trying to be helpful.
Well, that's one of the exercises I did when I got triggered that week. I started just having a notepad on my computer. And when I started having all those emotions, those feelings coming through, I said, okay, I'm not gonna let you take over today. What I am gonna do is say, what are you trying to communicate to me? What are you trying to tell me that I need to hear right now? And I would write down any thought that came in my brain. I just started writing stuff down. And I started finding out really where that was coming from. And I'm with you. I think I personally need to do some somatic work with you, honestly, to work through some of that. But it felt good to get those thoughts, those emotions down on paper, to get them out, to process it.
Well, Chris, why don't we do
Um,
this? Why don't we
yeah.
do just a quick 5 minute exercise, somatic exercise that your listeners can then do if when they're feeling this. So let's, if you don't mind, if you're comfortable with it, do you want to go back to that day with your son and feel into
Yeah,
that
we
a little
can
bit? Are you
we can do
comfortable with that?
that. We can do that.
Okay. So just sit, plant your feet on the floor. You can actually feel the connection between your feet and the floor. You're grounding. You're there. You're here. You're present, right? You're safe. You're in your beautiful library.
This is all for all the listeners that aren't watching the Zoom call. This is a made up picture on Chat GPT, but it is beautiful.
It is. It's gorgeous. Look at that mountain behind you, man. It's gorgeous. So if you just get your feet on the floor, so you know you're here, you can feel your seat in your chair. You can feel your back in the back. You can feel those connections between your body and the present environment.
Okay.
And then just close your eyes and just start thinking through that day until you start to get a somatic experience in your chest or stomach. And then once you get that, just describe that experience to me.
So when I think about that day, it was very gut wrenching. It was very, I was speechless for words.
Where
I
were you?
did, I was right now, what I'm picturing is being in the ER room,
Okay.
trying to find out what happened.
What color were the
And
walls?
um, I want to say maybe a grayish color,
Gray or cream?
gray or cream color.
What,
Yeah, yeah,
what,
cream color.
what color was the bedding?
The bedding it was white sheet stuff they put down on those hospital beds.
Okay. What was it, a male or female doctor?
Female doctor,
Do you remember her name?
Chandler.
Chandler. So as you're picturing this scene when you're being told what's happened, can you describe physically what you're feeling? Not your response, not emotionally, but physically, what do you feel?
My heart was racing.
Is it racing
Uh,
now?
it's starting to.
Okay. Just feel into that. Let it race. Just allow it to happen. You're safe now, right?
Yeah,
So just allow that to happen and just continue to describe the feeling to me. And then if you could assign a number between 1 and 10, just give me what that intensity feels like right now.
it's definitely building towards a 7.
Okay. Just allow it to build. It's okay. You're safe. Nothing's going to happen.
I just remember feeling very, very intense that day.
Hmm.
My mind was going 1,000 miles an hour. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't even know what was happening. Uh,
And what does that bring up for you physically when you think about the fact that you were just completely hopeless? You had no solution. You were just there getting this horrible news. What do you feel in your body?
I had a pain in my lower stomach, kind of like a
Okay.
shooting pain,
Do you have that pain
and
now?
I'm feeling it now on my right
Okay.
side.
So when you feel it and you focus on it, focus all of your attention on that experience somatically, does that feeling get more intense or less intense?
Right now, it's staying the same.
Okay.
Same
And
intensity.
on that scale of 1 to 10, where would that be?
That one's a 5.
Okay. So just focus on that pain in your stomach and the rapid heart rate if that's still there. And just really put your energy into focusing on it. You could even count the heartbeats if you want. And when you really start getting an intense somatic experience, just let me know. Say if that jumps above a 6 or a 7.
It, I feel like it's been evening itself out. It was starting to climb a minute ago, but it's kind of flatlined.
Okay. So just open your eyes and look at me because we're right here. We're present. We're not in that moment. We're right here. And that's a really crappy way to feel, right?
Yeah.
So you feel it, you've identified it, you know why you're feeling it. Next time you feel it, you'll know why you're feeling it. But right now, we want to try to tame it down a little bit. So if you just breathe in for 5 seconds, hold it for 2, and then when you exhale, extend that exhale for about 8 seconds. And do that 5 times. Really focusing on the coolness of the breath entering your body, the warmth of it leaving, any kind of resistance in your chest as you're trying to breathe. Focus on that. And just feel that pain in your stomach and that heart rate start to subside a little bit. That's right. Perfectly safe. Is that 5?
It's 5.
So if you,
That pain started to go away in my stomach.
yeah. So that's somatic experiencing. You want to feel it, lean into it, understand it, because ultimately it's your body and your mind trying to tell you something, right? It was a horrifying experience. It affected the rest of your life. It has ultimately driven you to do some really wonderful things. So it's ultimately had a very positive impact in your life and probably countless other people's lives. So it was a sacrifice of your son and a sacrifice of the future with him, but it generated something beautiful, right? Obviously, no one wants to lose their child, but you'll see him again, right?
Definitely.
You'll, hopefully, they have fishing in high heaven so you guys can go fishing.
I hope so.
And hopefully, it
Yeah,
looks like that lake behind you because that's a beautiful lake.
yeah, I wouldn't mind that background. That would be nice.
Yeah. So
So
feeling it is ultimately what we have to do. And we spend so much time trying to avoid feeling it that it just festers. So you have to feel it. You have to lean into it. And as you begin to understand it, and you can lower the tension in your body by breathing or using other somatic exercises. Tapping is another one. I think we did that at the end of our podcast when you were on mine, where we did the humming and the tapping. These are all things that help process the trauma through the somatic feeling from underneath.
I remember that tapping exercise we did with the humming on that first podcast, and I will say for the listeners that are listening to this episode, it really did work. I felt an automatic drop in tension in your body doing that exercise. It was very powerful.
Yeah. I mean, we could do that one real quick too, if you like, just to show your audience.
Yeah, definitely. Are you
Okay.
open to that?
So you got triggered on a call.
Yeah, a few weeks ago.
So just think about that. Try to bring that somatic experience back up in your body as you think about it. As soon as you start thinking about it, you should probably feel some activation.
Okay.
Okay. So what we're going to do is the same breathing technique, but on the out breath, we're going to hum as low as we possibly can. For me, it's whoa, really creating some vibration in your chest, right? And you're going to extend it out as long as you can, not necessarily 8 seconds, it might be 20. And then as you do that, just kind of tap your chest. So you're doing something like this. Feels really good. When you do that, you start feeling a slight vibration in your chest. And if you follow it, you can follow it all the way down your body. It starts sinking your body all the way to the tips of your toes. And you'll feel that vibration here and then all the way down by your feet. Go ahead and try that. And just do it like twice or 3 times.
So just breathe in and then I exhale, hum, and then beat.
Real low hum because you want to create vibration in your chest. What we're doing right now is we're toning our vagus nerve. Remember we talked about the vagus nerve like a ladder? We're toning this part of the vagus nerve, making it stronger. The longer we spend down here, the more focus that the brain puts into that, and it starts developing that part of the brain. People with PTSD and complex PSD have a really strong limbic system because they're constantly scanning for danger and reacting to danger that's not there. So what we're doing is we're strengthening this part of the brain, this part of the nervous system, so that we can spend more time present and connected.
Gotcha. I'm going to try that real quick.
Yeah, go ahead. And just sit in peace, feel it. If you don't feel it on this one, you'll probably feel it on the next. And those at home can try it too. It's a good one. Go ahead. And then just stop tapping and just feel the vibration.
That's Russ, that's fast. It's vibrating throughout my chest and it's going down.
Yeah.
It's actually going down to my legs.
It's amazing.
That's really powerful, my friend.
Yeah. The other thing that I would think, it sounds like a sales pitch, but hypnotherapy bypasses the critical function. So it bypasses that default mode network that we're constantly living in, that filter that's filtering all the information that's coming in. Does a lot of the same things that like psychedelic treatments are going to do. It's going to bypass all the crap that you've gone through to get to the truth, to get to you, to your actual true self, without all the filters that we run and stories that we run in the background. And it allows you to contact the true you who already knows what you need to do to heal. That's essentially all hypnotherapy is. It's just allowing you to do the things that you already know how to do to fix whatever problem you're facing. And that's ultimately where hypnotherapy comes in to make that a lot more powerful and a lot faster, pretty rapid.
I'd love to bring you back on another episode to demonstrate some of those exercises if you're open to that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, if we got time, I can put you down for about 10 minutes so you can experience it and everybody can see it.
I mean, yeah, if you got some time now, we can definitely try that.
I've got time. Sure.
Okay. Let's do that.
You want to try it out?
Yeah, let's give it a try.
Have you ever been hypnotized before?
I have not.
So have you ever taken a long drive?
I drove across country last year, so I drove 6 to 9 hours in a car.
Cool. What was Kansas like?
Well, I didn't go as far south as Kansas, but I'll just say the Midwest was a lot of cornfields and flatland. Yeah. And once I got to Montana, it was nice to see the mountains.
How much of the trip do you actually remember, or how much of it are you just creating in your mind because you know you were there?
I kind of have an eidetic memory to some degree, so I can remember certain parts of that drive really well. Other parts I can't remember very well.
Yeah. So a lot of times, again, our brains are designed to be efficient. So our brains will create scripts that we run when we're doing things that we do often to remove our energy expenditure for that particular activity. A lot of times it's driving.
Well, I'll share what was weird about that experience really quickly. The days that I drove, because we split shifts in the car, but if I drove 5 to 6 hours in a day, I would actually get out of my car and my body would be like vibrating, if that makes any sense. And I would also kind of feel this kind of motion, like you're tipping back and forth a little bit, like you're on a boat. I would feel that after long days in the car.
Hmm.
So
Tipping
it's
back and
kind of
forth like being on a boat?
yeah, like if you're ever been on a boat and it's going up and down in the waves kind of thing. It wasn't
Yeah.
that
And you
radical as a
you
boat, but
have
it
a
was.
boat, right?
And I have a boat, so I was used to that feeling on my boat. But when I was
Yeah.
driving in the car,
How do
I
you
would like
describe how do you describe that feeling to somebody who's never been on a boat?
if you've never been on a boat before, especially out in like stormy conditions like I've been out in, just picture how you normally walk down the street, like you're walking to work into the office building, and you're fully, straight. You feel very in control. You're just walking the normal way you do. When you're out on a boat like that, what kind of happens? It'd be like if you were walking, somebody just pushed you, and
Hmm.
you kind of went like this for a second, then you straightened back, and then you went the opposite way, and then came back.
Just
Picture that
find
multiple
like you're
times. That's what it.
constantly finding balance.
Yeah, like you're constantly trying to find
Yeah.
that balance and you're fighting off these efforts that are coming both ways to you.
Externally, right? These things are coming from the outside and really affecting you, but your body and your mind are working together very efficiently to help you prevent from falling over and regaining that balance. Kind of like life, right?
Exactly like
We're
life.
constantly walking down a path being pushed from opposite directions and constantly trying to find that balance. Yeah. So if you look up at the ceiling, just right where you're just looking, were you looking at a clock just now?
I saw a notifications fly by, but up in
So,
my
so
ceiling.
just look at that corner of your screen where that notification was. Just the corner of the screen, not the screen itself, just the actual point where the two planes meet. And
Okay.
just gaze at that and stare at that for a minute. And I'm just going to chat with you while you're looking at that, okay?
Okay.
Yeah. Have you ever been hypnotized before?
I haven't.
But we already kind of decided we have, right? Whether
Yes.
it's being hypnotized by someone else or by our own mind, we go into hypnosis, into a different state of consciousness every day. So you already know what it feels like. You already know how relaxing it can be. You already know how you lose track of time. You already know how relaxing. You already know how deep it can take you. In fact, I wonder how long it would take while staring at that point for your eyes to start getting more and more relaxed. It's okay to blink. When you blink, you're dropping into trance. It's already happening. Does it feel comfortable?
Feels very comfortable right now.
Yeah. So I wonder how long it'll take as you're relaxing more and more for your eyes just to slowly begin to close. I wonder if it would happen really fast, or maybe it would take a little more time for the muscles around your eyes to completely relax, and then just allow them to slowly shut. There you go. That's right. And then I wonder if with every breath you take, you sink a little deeper into your chair. And with every depth that you go down, you become more and more relaxed, fusing into the seat underneath you, allowing your body to loosen, starting with the muscles in your eyebrows, temples, eyes, cheeks. In fact, you might even find that your eyes are relaxing so much that it can become difficult to open them. Do you think that your eyes could relax so much that it would be difficult to open them?
Yes.
And if you relax to that point now and you tried opening them, do you think that they would remain shut?
They would.
Why don't you go ahead and try to open them and realize that they're glued shut and you can't open them? And then once you realize that, just allow yourself to sink even deeper. That's right. Even deeper. That's right. And just allow your chin to fall forward a little bit, kind of like you're looking down a window, down a flight of stairs. Just allow the muscles in your neck to relax as you go deeper. Each breath pulling you deeper into your seat, more and more relaxed. Feels good, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Chris, you're safe here. This is your space. You're here for you. You're here to heal. And you can come here anytime you like. All you have to do is close your eyes, take a deep breath, and sink deeper into your chair. Following your breath all the way down your body towards your feet and beyond. Chris, I want you to imagine yourself standing at the top of a staircase. It's a safe, beautiful staircase. Could be white, could be brown, could be stone, could be wood. Whatever your mind presents to you is exactly what it should be. And it leads you deeper, deeper into a state of relaxation and self-discovery. With each step down, you relax even more. 10 steps between you and complete relaxation. Are you eager to go down these stairs, Chris?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm just going to count as you take steps, and I want you to feel your feet and hear your feet as they come into contact with the steps. 10, feeling safe, dropping deeper, floating, gliding down. 9, even deeper now. Allowing every fiber in your body, every cell to let go and relax. 8, going all the way down. 7, feeling lighter. 6, 5, you're halfway there. Letting go of tension, fear, anxiety, all of it just slipping away. 4, 3, almost there. 2, 1, deeply relaxed, sinking, dropping, drifting. Do you recognize this place, Chris? Does it feel normal? Does it feel relaxing?
Feels calm.
Good. So in this deep, calm, safe place, I want you to imagine a mirror in front of you. This mirror reflects not just your physical appearance, but the truth of who you are. For so long, you may have seen yourself through the distorted lens of someone else's words. But today, you see yourself clearly. You see your strength. You see your worth. And as you look into this mirror, you realize something powerful. You were never broken. You were never too much. You were never not enough. You were simply taught to believe lies. Lies you don't need. lies that no longer serve you. So, Chris, I want you to imagine a bag in your right hand. It doesn't have to be a huge bag. It could be made of brown leather or fabric or plastic, like a suitcase. Maybe it has a strap across the top to lock it shut, or perhaps it's just a padlock on the zipper. Either way, I want you to open that bag and see how empty that bag is, Chris. All the space inside of it, the liner, the feeling of it in your hand. And Chris, I want you to take those lies that you've been told throughout your life about who you are and what you can do, and I want you to put them in that bag. Anything that no longer serves you, anything that causes you stress or harm, just place those items in that bag and just give me a nod once they're all in there. That's right. Just place them in there. Anything that you no longer want, anything that no longer serves you. The bag is plenty big enough for all of it. Okay. Now, Chris, I want you to shut the bag. Shut the bag, secure it. Just set it on the seat next to you. And as you set it on the seat, I want you to realize that you're in an airport terminal. You can hear the hustle and bustle of passengers coming to and fro. Some laughing, some stressed. But you feel no stress. As you sit in your chair, maybe you read a magazine or play a game on your phone or answer emails. And you realize you have a flight to catch. Your gate number is number 1. And you start hearing numbers being called out. And each number, you just realize you go so much deeper than you were before. 10 times deeper with every number that's called. Starting with 10. Now boarding gate 10. 9. 8 and 7 come pretty quickly. So you realize that your number is coming. And maybe you stand up. Maybe you stand up and start making your way to the gate as you hear 6, 5, 4, 3. It's almost your turn. 2. Now boarding gate 1. And just make your way to that gate. Present the gate person with your ticket, your boarding pass, as they stamp it and allow you to walk through. And as you walk through that gate and start making your way down the causeway to the jet, you remember that you're heading somewhere. Somewhere amazing. It could be a friend's house or family, maybe a beach or a vibrant city. Somewhere that you feel amazing. Somewhere where you feel your worth and your value swelling inside of you. Somewhere comfortable, somewhere safe. And you can hear the echo of your steps as you walk down the causeway to the jet, feeling the brisk, cool air coming from the window. And Chris, as you walk through the door of that jet, I want you to picture a flight attendant there smiling, warm and inviting. And maybe they direct you to where your seat is and you make your way down the aisle. Every step taking you deeper. And then Chris, as you sit down in your seat, I want you to feel the cushions, the warmth wrapping around you, holding you and keeping you safe as the plane begins to move and taxiing to the runway. And Chris, I want you to imagine sitting on that runway waiting to take off, hearing the engines roar as they begin to idle up faster and faster, louder and louder. And then I want you to feel the jolt pulling you into the back of your seat as the plane accelerates down the runway. And you can feel when it leaves the ground, can't you? And as it climbs higher into the air, can you feel yourself sinking even deeper, becoming more relaxed, knowing that you're heading somewhere wonderful? And then as that plane hits 30,000 feet and begins gliding above the clouds, no turbulence, just a nice, soft, pleasant ride, gliding, floating above the clouds. And then I want you to imagine the pilot coming over the intercom, letting you know that they'll be descending soon to that wonderful destination. And when you feel the tires of the plane come into contact with the ground, you realize that you are also grounded. You are also here in this moment, living this. How wonderful. Eventually, the plane makes its way to the gate. And the seatbelt sign gets turned off, and you unbuckle your seatbelt and walk down the aisle toward the door of the plane, being greeted once again by that friendly attendant as they wave and say goodbye, enjoy your trip. And you walk out of the gate, past the gate attendant, out of the terminal, past the baggage claim and out the front door into a taxi or an Uber, or however else you'll get to your destination. And then when you arrive at your destination, you're sitting there, relaxing, being filled, being fed. I want you to realize that you left that bag at the other airport, sitting on that chair, filled with all those things that no longer serve you. It doesn't cause you any anxiety. You're not concerned about losing the bag because you realize you don't need it anymore. And that fills you with a sense of peace. It fills you with a knowing that you are enough. Say it with me, Chris. I am enough.
I am enough.
I am worthy.
I am worthy.
I am lovable.
I am lovable.
And I've been put on this earth
And I have been put on this earth
to do amazing things,
to do amazing things,
to help other people feel the way that I do right now.
to help other people feel the way that I do now.
And just allow that knowing and that knowledge to penetrate every part of your being. Because you are enough. You always have been. And just allow that to set and settle inside of you. And then once you know that is true, and once your subconscious mind really knows that that is true, just give me a little nod to let me know. That's right. So, Chris, I'm going to count from 5 to 1. And as I do, you'll gently come back to full awareness. Coming back different. Something has changed. It might be hard to put your finger on it to begin with. But the more you think about it, the more you realize that you're bringing back with you a deep sense of self-worth, clarity, and peace. You'll come back energized, ready to conquer the rest of the day. 1, gently coming back, feeling sensations in your fingers, toes, legs, and arms. 2, feeling more confident, lighter. 3, bringing back this deep truth. You are enough. 4, feeling awake, refreshed, empowered. 5, eyes open, fully present, feeling incredible.
Wow, brother. Oof. Wow.
It's good stuff.
Wow. Whew.
Feel
Feel
good?
like I just feel like I took a nap for 4 hours. I feel good.
Yeah, it was only about 30 minutes. It actually took a little longer than I expected to, but still good.
That was transformational, Russ. I've never done hypnotherapy before, but I literally just felt like I took a nap for 4 hours and I feel like clear in the head, just clear.
That's great.
Like,
That's awesome. That's the point. That's the idea.
wow. I just have to say thank you. I
You're welcome.
appreciate this.
It's my pleasure, man.
Russ, I'm really grateful that you and I got to connect today on today's podcast. This has been, I know for the listeners that are going to watch this episode or listen to this episode, they're going to have some massive takeaways.
Oh, I hope
Um,
so. Yeah.
I, I'm very grateful I'm grateful I got to do this episode with the guy that got me on the journey to podcasting, and here we are with another transformational episode to help inspire other people how to navigate tough trauma to work through that and be able to put themselves in a better place. I can't say it enough, my friend. You have a very talented skill set with your
Thank you.
somatic and hypnotherapy teaching. As we wrap up this episode, I want to first off ask you, how can people get in touch with you?
Probably the easiest way is to visit brainspottingcs.com. That's my website. I'm based in Colorado, but I work with people all over the world. Um, Most of this stuff is done via Zoom. You saw how powerful this stuff can be via Zoom. So, um, also, if they wanted to reach out via phone, they could reach out by calling 719 200 1010, and that's a direct line to me. Or if they wanted to reach out on Facebook, they can look me up, Russell, Russell, Tellup, Tellup, and just send me a private message.
Well, Russell, I want to thank you so much for being on my podcast today. And I want to thank all my listeners right now for joining Russ and I on a very transformational episode. I have yet to do this on a podcast episode, so I'm having a lot of experiences right now that I'll be sharing on Facebook with you guys. Um,
Fabulous.
but yeah, I just want to thank you guys for joining Russ and I today on this episode, The Empower Grief Journey. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with somebody that you know could benefit from this, and also from Russ's experiences sharing somatic healing and as well as hypnotherapy. The Empower Grief Journey is about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding your strength in your own time. I want to invite you guys to follow this podcast at empowergriefjourney.com. I want you guys also to remember you're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.